Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. Today, we're going to focus on Armenian American studies and why it can be a part and should be a part of your ethnic studies curriculum. My name's Michelle Herzog. I'm the History Social Science Coordinator for History Social Science here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And I am so honored and thrilled to have two very special guests, expert educators in this subject area, teachers at Glendale Unified, Patrick Davahanian and Gagik Galfayan. Thank you guys for coming today.
Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here.
Thank you so much.
Great. You're going to learn a lot from them today. Well, we know ethnic studies is a graduation requirement here in California. High schools across the state are supposed to have something in place for the 2025-26 school year. The ethnic studies model curriculum puts a primary focus on four foundational groups: African American, Native American, Latino, Latinx, and Asian American and Pacific Islander. But we know in California, as diverse as we are, there are many, many, many other groups that deserve recognition. And that's why we've invited our friends here today to talk about the Armenian American experience. So you have much to share with us, and I'm really grateful. They've written some curriculum too, which people will have access to. So we're excited to see that. So let's start with this question first. What do we mean by Armenian American studies?
Yeah, that's a really important question. When we talk about the Armenian American studies, we're referring to the stories, to the history, to the culture, and to the contributions of the Armenian Americans, not only to the state, but to the nation overall. There are four specific areas that we're going to be focusing on when it comes to the Armenian American studies. That includes the immigration patterns, settlement patterns, the socioeconomical contributions, and the political activism that Armenian Americans have showcased in this country. And also a really important aspect, which is the cultural retention and the adaptation of the Armenian American experience.
Yeah, and the contributions of Armenian Americans is quite broad in our society. We have, in our unit plan, we've attempted to incorporate personal narratives, a lot of diverse perspectives, community history, and just in order to get a broader understanding of the socio-political framework of the various groups.
Well, I'm glad we're including contributions to American society. Many of us know, of course, about the horrible Armenian genocide, and that needs to be a part of every student's education for
Absolutely.
sure. But we don't want to stop there. Mm-hmm. We want to recognize the rich culture, traditions, and contributions, and being a viable group here in American society, as so many other groups are.
Yes.
So I'm glad we're focusing on that as well.
Absolutely.
So let's dig in a little bit more. Tell us a little more about that Armenian American experience. How do you characterize it? What is it like?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, the Armenian American experience is quite diverse, quite varied. It starts actually, really interestingly enough, in the 1600s with Martin the Armenian.
In America,
in what was to be the United States, in North America, colonial North America. We have Martin the Armenian. He was a silkworm cultivator. Fascinating story. And his story is documented on various logs. And then, of course, as we get into the 20th century, we also learn of the Armenian genocide and the impact it had on the Armenian community and the creation of the diaspora. With genocide, we get an influx of Armenians coming to the United States and contributing to various aspects of our local economy, of our state's economy. Many coming to the East Coast as well, in what is now Watertown, and of course many coming to Fresno, where we get an established Armenian community. And many Armenians fled, to escape the genocide, and they fled to escape many hardships. But really, this is kind of an important moment in our history. As they came to the United States, they faced a lot of racial prejudice. They faced a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, which many other groups were facing at the time as well. So I think that's important to mention.
So we know here in LA there's a huge Armenian American community in Glendale,
Yes,
but you
that's
mentioned
correct.
some other places around the United States.
Yes.
Where else would we find Armenian Americans?
Yeah,
populated?
Watertown, Massachusetts,
Yes.
one of the early settlements of Armenian immigrants coming in. The Central Valley of California, Fresno specifically, because of its strong agricultural economy that attracted them there at that time. And then we see most of the Southern California immigration taking place, I would say, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, specifically historical events taking place like the Civil War in Lebanon, the revolution in Iran in the 70s. In the 80s, we have the Iran-Iraq War, in the earthquake in Armenia in 1988, and then in the 90s with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we see Armenians coming in from diverse locations, and these are the survivors of the genocide who had actually gone to Lebanon and Iraq and Iran. And they end up coming here in the United States in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, here in Southern California. And I know that, Patrick talked about the racial discrimination that Armenian Americans face specifically in Fresno, and we have lesson plans that really talks about that. But I think you wanted to mention the Immigration Act that really opened
absolutely. I think what's unique about the ethnic studies experience is how just interconnected we all are, the various communities. And one example of this is the Naturalization Act of 1965, which is really a result of the civil rights movement. Thanks to the civil rights movement, our nation embraces kind of an inclusive perspective, and that's really when in 1965 where Armenians get to access the American experience. And with this piece of legislation, Armenians are finally able to come to the United States. The quota systems that held them back because they tended to allow for mostly Western Europeans to come to the U.S. is lifted as a result of the civil rights movement and this new legislation. And so we get an influx of Armenians coming to the United States. And that has a powerful and significant role in the contributions they provide for.
Well, you don't hear those stories very much. When kids open the book to learn civil rights movement, we don't hear about that. So it had impact in a lot of different groups in a lot of different ways, very positively.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. When we lift one group up, we help others as well, which is, that's what we want to convey to our students through our 5 units of study.
Yes, we've heard Stuart Quo and others talk about the interrelationships, the interconnectedness that different groups support one another, benefit from the impact of one, come together. So we're hearing and seeing that too. Fascinating. Human spirit, a positive way. Not enough stories about that, right? Excellent. That's great. So we know about the California Ethnic Studies model curriculum. How can California teachers, educators access resources about Armenian Americans in there? Is it in there?
Yeah, that's, we're really excited to be here for this. Patrick and I have worked together to really develop a study where our students get to experience what it means to be Armenian American and really learn about the Armenian American history, their experiences, their stories. And what we wanted to make sure is that there are diverse voices in our unit plans. I know that our units and our lessons will be available on the California State portal, which our educators can access. What we wanted to do is, when we made this 15-lesson, 5-unit case study, we wanted to provide as many resources as we can to our fellow educators, because we know that sometimes it takes a lot of time to really go out and research. Besides planning the lesson plans, we wanted to provide all the resources, all of the articles, videos, podcasts. If there are any particular activities that are involved in the lesson plan, to make sure we provide the training necessary for them to be able to implement it into their class. And also our lessons have been designed in a way to make it really interactive for our students, to bring in that critical thinking aspect of it, and to allow our students to bring their voices in those conversations as well.
Yeah, and I agree. That's it's very important, and it was basically something we were really dedicated to doing, making sure that we cover the 8 outcomes of ethnic studies. So intersectionality, activism, community, local community history, these were all important topics for us to include in our mini studies, in our mini study. And There are a number of activities like Gagik mentioned. We do have concentric circles, Socratic seminars, a lot of opportunities for discussion and dialogue. So we hope that it will be useful, and it is going to be quite engaging and fun.
Oh, I think it will be.
well
Yeah,
as
because you've
informative.
designed some really great, and I love having teachers develop it because you know what works in the
Yes.
classroom
Absolutely.
and making it interesting and engaging. So
And-
I think students are going to learn a lot, but I think teachers will learn a lot
Yes,
too.
Yeah.
definitely.
And that's the wonderful part when you have teachers being the curriculum developers. We get to try it in our own classrooms. And because of that, we were able to go back and modify some things because it looks great on paper. But once you implement it, we're like, no, this can't be done in 60 minutes. This is going to take
Definitely.
90 minutes. It's going to adjust that or take something away. It's too much. So we experimented and tried out all of these lessons in our own classes and have gotten great feedback from our students and have shared with our colleagues. So hopefully when you do try it in your own classroom, they can experience the
So
same.
how do your students feel when they go through this, particularly your Armenian
Yes.
students? How do they feel seeing their stories as part of the classroom curriculum?
You know, that's the wonderful part. A lot of our students don't know their own story
Yes.
completely. They know parts of it. But for example, the history of specific Armenian dance, the Kochari dance, which we do a whole lesson on, and they learn that Kochari, was really a community building dance, and how the community came together. It was a way for them to bond and to really develop community, because a lot of our students just see the dance performed at weddings or at other cultural events, but they have never really learned the story behind it. And this gave them opportunity to understand that their ancestors and people who came before them used this dance as a rallying call, especially at times of difficulty, and try to unite the community so they can go ahead and resist whatever was happening to them at that time.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet it's affirming for parents too, for their
Yeah.
kids to come home and say, hey, now I know what the dance is about,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not something you tend to get in a high school setting, at least. Kids
Yes.
excited about an activity they did, but they were talking to their friends about it. We actually got an opportunity, the students got an opportunity to learn the dance and try it out. And so, you're hitting up on various learning modalities, which is nice too. And yeah,
Is it a religious dance or is it more cultural?
Not
it's,
religious.
No, it's not religious. It's
Okay, 'cause
cultural.
Sometimes we have to be careful. in
Yes,
schools not to go there.
and it goes back to ancient Armenian traditions,
my.
which is nice. As Gagik mentioned, many even Armenian American students perhaps have a surface level understanding of their culture, but our lessons allow them for deeper, meaningful understanding. So yeah, it's basically it mimics the motions of the ram, which was in ancient Armenian lore an important animal, right? So the actual dancing process is similar to the ram butting its horns against another ram in a
Okay.
competitive
Yes.
match. So it's very fascinating.
Oh, I bet that's great. Thank you. That sounds wonderful. So if teachers are working on a broader ethnic studies course, curriculum, why would you feel it's important to include Armenian American studies? Why
Yeah.
should that be included? And not just for Armenian students,
Sure.
but for all.
Yeah.
How would you argue that?
It's a great question, and like you said, not just for Armenian American students, but for all students. I think it's important. There are three main reasons why I think we think that Armenian American studies should be included. And the first one is that traditionally this group, and generally speaking, Swana people, their stories are not told. Their voices are not heard. Perhaps a mention of the genocide, of the Armenian genocide, in at least textbooks in California. But other than that, the depth and the complexity of this group, and it is quite deep. It is quite complex. The contributions of Armenian Americans is wide, but it's not told. Those stories are not told, and I think that's important that we make an effort to include those stories and to include the contributions of Armenian Americans. But also, Armenian American stories, or rather Armenian Americans have contributed greatly to the American experience, not just to California, but to our broader American experience, from healthcare to business to defense, politics, governance of our country. It's we have so many. I mean, even pop culture and media, celebrities and former governors and attorney generals.
Okay.
It's quite broad.
So it's a story of resilience as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Resilience and perseverance.
Very good. Yeah, powerful. So going a little bit deeper, let's talk about how learning about Armenian American history, identity, the experiences, help students understand that broader understanding of California's diverse ethnic communities. California's diverse, but so are other states.
Yeah, so the first thing we have to look at is the historical integration. So learning about the Armenian immigration experience from Fresno's farms to the LA businesses, it showcases the transformative aspect of the communities in California's development. And that's one specific example in terms of the culture and political contributions by exploring the lives of individuals like William Saroyan, Governor George Deukmejian, even celebrities like Cher. Students see the broad impact of Armenian Americans, specifically within California and its culture and governance. When we talk about economic contributions, discussing the agricultural and the business aspects of the Armenian American experience really highlights what different ethnic groups contribute to our society and overall to California and their identity and representation. For example, studying Armenian American experiences allows our California students to get a better global understanding of different cultures, which is so important, especially in today's world. And the contemporary impact in regards to examining the ongoing roles of Armenian Americans, especially within our political system. I think Armenian Americans have demonstrated how one group can really unite and make change. For example, Armenian Americans have fought for a long time to get the recognition of the Armenian genocide, both within California and the United States. And this political struggle and the unity that the community has showed has been an example for other cultures and other groups within California, within the United States, and what they can do to bring change in regards to civic activism.
And there's been a lot of great change in recognizing the genocide.
Yes.
But it's so much more than just that.
Yes.
We've often heard, if our group is only identified by the genocide, you'll hear Jewish families say, we only come up when we talk about the Holocaust.
Yes.
Or African Americans, we only come up when it's about slavery, right?
Yes.
So, and that's a real goal. I think another goal of ethnic studies is understanding your own self, your own identity, but learning others too, and understanding, appreciating, and respecting that. And so it's a win-win for Armenian American students and all others, I think, as well, right?
Exactly, yes. And it's also an example of how different communities really work together on this cause. For example, with the, genocide recognition effort, Armenian Americans really built alliances and relationships with a variety of different groups, including Hispanic Americans, Greek Americans, Jewish Americans, and their organizations really helped for this opportunity to come where the genocide was recognized, because politically speaking, it was a very tough road, really tough road, because the Turkish nation today is a very powerful and important country, and for their veto to be overruled by a small group of individuals here in the United States, because Armenian Americans don't make up a large proportion of our country. It's, our numbers are anywhere from 1 million to 1,200,000 out of a population of 340 million. So, in terms of numbers, we don't have that many. But I think because we built the alliances necessary with other groups that really supported us, because we also support them in other efforts, contribute in that effort.
And that's a great model, I think, for other groups, to that interconnectedness we talked about earlier, coming together for a common cause. Maybe the cause is for one group, but we can come together for other groups too.
Right.
That's what we should be doing. Now, my understanding is that Turkey still is not recognized. Is that true?
That's right.
Still the case?
Not only do they not recognize it, but there are legal restraints and people who even mention the term Armenian genocide.
In Turkey.
in Turkey today.
They could be imprisoned for that
That's
because
That's still
yeah,
going on.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's considered insulting Turkishness.
yeah.
Which
Well,
is,
I mean, we have to remember the context.
Of
You know,
course.
in Turkey, the Kurdish people are about 25% of the population, and they're still not allowed to have, you know, their own language taught in the public schools, and they're being, you know, discriminated against and all this other stuff. So that's the context that you're dealing with. But one day, you know, just like in everywhere else throughout this world, you know, things change and people really learn about history and they start to question things, and that's what's happening within Turkey. People. Turkish people are asking questions, doing DNA tests and discovering that they're part Armenian, which is really interesting because their ancestors had to, you know, hide their identity or else they would be discriminated against or harassed. So a lot of changes are happening, and I'm hopeful that, you know, things will change.
I'm sure the first generation of Armenians that came here probably struggled with some of that too, right? Being publicly identifying their heritage.
Yes.
Maybe each generation can, thanks to lessons and work you're doing,
Yes.
can feel more prideful
Yes.
and more outwardly public.
Yes.
and I think that's something we also acknowledged in our lessons, often overlooked, is that intergenerational trauma that impacts Armenian Americans and all people. So that we're glad we were able to include that as well.
And our story tells, you know, not only the struggles, like for example, here, not very far away in Montebello, when the Armenian Americans were trying to erect a monument in remembrance of the Armenian genocide in the 1960s. At first, the city had declined because they were getting a lot of pressure from the Turkish consulate, and until the Armenian Americans were able to put their own pressure, they got the approval to get that monument erected in Montebello. But today, you know, we have a council member who is of Armenian American descent. We have multiple assembly members, senators within California. You know, you drive on the 134 east by Pasadena, you see the sign for the Armenian Genocide Memorial.
Yes.
And that didn't come easily. You know, Armenian Americans had to fight for that to make sure that, you know, their voices were heard as well.
Well, that speaks to the power of civic engagement,
Yes.
which is a lot of the work that I've been committed to for many years, is how do we move the needle
Yes.
in ways that are going to be effective, that are also responsible without creating some chaos.
Yes.
So the fact that folks are stepping up and running for those offices gives them a certain amount of power, voice, citizens coming together across different groups.
Yeah,
It's democracy, right?
Yes.
absolutely.
It's not an easy road.
It's not.
No,
That's right.
it's long.
It's long, but worth it.
I think so too. I think so too.
And I think a lot of the efforts in genocide advocacy and activism really have taught the contemporary activists today, Armenian Americans who are fighting for various causes, not just Armenian causes, some of those skills and techniques that they're now
Transfer to
utilizing and
other
transferring
issues.
over. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
noteworthy.
Okay, so we've talked a little about the lessons.
Yes.
Walk us through one to give us a sense of what it's like, if you would.
We've got some great lessons. This is just one of them. This is from our first unit, our introductory unit. And this is lesson 3, the history of racial partitioning in Fresno. And it's quite an interesting lesson. So the educator actually starts with a bit of a background on Fresno, and we provide all the resources for educators. So the background is quite fascinating.
Yeah, tell us a little bit.
Yeah, it's so Fresno was actually one of the most racially partitioned cities in our country for quite some time. And you know, the educator will present the information and start with this brief introduction, and students will learn the degree to which this city was partitioned, racially partitioned, with various zoning restrictions. Redlining was quite an issue in Fresno and across the country. But this impacted not only people of color, but Armenians as well, who are coming into the
Fresno
area.
is pretty diverse.
Yeah, it is.
Now
Absolutely.
it is.
Now it is.
Yeah.
Back then,
Yeah.
Different story.
Different story, yeah. And I learned a lot about this too when we did our research on how segregated the city really was. And
between white and Armenian?
between what they called Caucasian and non-Caucasians. And Armenians were not considered Caucasian.
That's right.
So And that's the thing when we talk about, the idea of whiteness and race, how whiteness can change throughout history, and definition of what being white means, and how certain ethnic groups have to go to court to prove their whiteness so they can get the privilege that comes with that. And Armenian Americans experienced that, moving into Fresno in the early 20th century, they experienced discrimination in the fields of employment. And what was available at that time, mostly fields, work in the agricultural field. And they faced a lot of discrimination. They couldn't own their own land. They faced a lot of harassment from competitors who tried to shut them down, especially in the raisin industry, the grape industry. And they had to fight, unite, and create their own co-ops and actually work together. But they faced a lot of discrimination within the real estate business as well. They were, with the redlining.
Yes, a lot of housing covenants.
Exactly, which did not allow them to purchase homes in certain neighborhoods because that was only for whites or Caucasians. And the lesson begins with that historical introduction, and then the students get an opportunity to read an article from the Fresno Bee, which is just beneath the dirt where the racism of Fresno begins. The students get into small groups, they read the article, and then they get to connect connect the article to the essential question of the lesson. And after that, we have a whole group discussion where students kind of share out what they have learned and get an opportunity to do an interactive activity where they go to University of Richmond and do an online redlining activity where they get to see the different neighborhoods in Fresno and how they redline and how that impacted not only Armenian Americans but also other groups as well, which for generations.
And it's a fascinating lesson. So you have the historical background, then you have the court cases they learn about just how the judicial system allowed an opportunity for Armenian Americans to challenge the status quo and to bring about more equity and justice. And so eventually those laws are deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and we start to see a trickling of progress. And students can actually use this interactive map, which we were able to find, which is one of the many resources we included, where they can see the impact on the various communities in Fresno.
Sadly, it's too common a story. Redlining, the discrimination, the defining of Caucasian, non-Caucasian. We hear this in the Sikh community, the Jewish community, so many, the Arab American community. So sadly being repeated. But like we said, with ethnic studies, this is an opportunity to lift those stories, put them out there, but then also look at these stories of resilience and the struggles that continue. I bet there are times when students are starting to see some of this hasn't quite gone away. How does that go in the classroom? Do kids bring that up? How does that evolve in a discussion? Where does it go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's what we want our students, when it comes to their critical thinking, to start to ask those questions. Well, this happened in 1925. They had redlining in Fresno. But what is really happening today? A lot of the redlining effects, even within Los Angeles, is still there because a lot of our neighborhoods, that have been redlined, the property values have not increased as much as the property values of the non-redlined areas. So it's just, the economical effect is still there. For me, I always like to share my own personal experience with a friend of mine who had shared with me, their family who's from Altadena had to go to court. They're African American. They had to go to court and in the 1960s to actually get the court to allow them to purchase the home that they bought in Altadena, because at that time the home deed did not allow it to be sold to an African American or Black family. And those effects are still there, and it's just our students bring those up is so important, and finding solutions to that. Not only raising what the issue is, but what can we do today to either amend the situation or
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing we're proud of is the research-based activities, research-based projects, and our culminating call to action project, which we included in our mini studies.
What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for students, once they've understood the basics and learned the history to begin implementing tools to bring about awareness. So it's a social media campaign which brings awareness to an issue that they have chosen to reflect on. And it's a great opportunity for students to delve deeper into a topic that interests them, to learn about the activists and the various techniques they use, and then to employ some of those techniques through something they're actually pretty great at, which is social media.
So you've gotten good reaction from students and families?
Yes.
What are some of the things you're hearing as feedback?
Definitely from the students.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken a lot to family members to get any feedback.
But you haven't heard any discontent or complaints. That's good.
Definitely not. But they enjoy things like, in our cultural unit, learning about Armenian poetry and how that was used to, call to people to certain action, and them getting an opportunity to write their own poetry, to express themselves, to find their own voice. Our students really appreciated that, and we have different role play activities where students get an opportunity to role play. In fact, in one of our activities we have where the students do this role play, we give them role cards, and they're either going to be the real estate agent or the Armenian American trying to buy the property, and we have a judge, and we have all these, because students really learn by doing, not just by listening. So it gives them an opportunity to really feel what it felt like to be that individual that was told you cannot buy this property because you're not Caucasian, or how would the real estate agent feel telling somebody that this home cannot be sold to them.
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of curriculum out there that focuses directly on this. So I think you've had a great service that you've provided in making this, and we're excited about making it public and available all over California. Well, it'll be online, so it'll be accessible for everyone. I'm sure the word will get out, even in Waterloo, Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, it's really excited about that.
Are they producing anything? Watertown, sorry. Are they producing anything out there? That you know of?
Say, but I don't think.
Well, you're going to inspire.
I know that California is, really ahead in terms of other states when it comes to ethnic studies. What we do here, I think other states will start to copy what we're doing, but
we hope.
I haven't even heard anything in regards to what they're doing there.
Well, I think in California we've made an attempt to advocate for honest and accurate history, and so therefore, these lessons will hopefully spread across the nation.
It's not happening in every state.
But
we're lucky to have it.
Yeah.
We're lucky to be here in California.
But I know that, an important organization that's, located in San Francisco, the Armenian Genocide Project, had learned that we were doing this, and they had asked to see our lessons, which we shared with them, and they're happy that we incorporated information on the Armenian Genocide, which is an important part, not the whole story, but definitely an important part. We use some of the resources, including their two-pager that has a lot of good comprehensive information on the Armenian Genocide prior to the teacher teaching the lesson and the students understanding. Because, I know ethnic studies has some aspects of history, but it's really the experiences of the ethnic groups that really matter. And when it comes to the Armenian Genocide, I know we touched on this before, but it's so important. It's this idea of the intergenerational trauma and how that has affected not only the survivors of the genocide, but their descendants as well. And it's still there, and something that Armenian Americans
that still today.
Definitely, definitely.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is going to be really affirming for them.
Yes.
Yeah. We've done a lot of work with Genocide Education Project.
Yes.
They have some great materials as well. But I think what your stuff, it goes even deeper and further and can benefit all our students. So as you can see, there's some great curriculum resources developed by these gentlemen, which I think will be really useful in your ethnic studies course, whether you have Armenian American students sitting in front of you or not. It's important for all our students to learn these stories. I want to particularly thank both of you for not only coming today, but for all the hard work you've done. Patrick Davarhanian, Gagik Alfayan, thank you so much for the heavy lifting you've done for such a great cause.
Thank you very much. It was quite a pleasure, and if I can speak for the both of us, I can say that we are really pleased and very proud of the work we've done, and we're looking forward to seeing these lessons implemented across our state and beyond our state.
Yeah, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring the Armenian voice into California's ethnic studies curriculum. And our goal was to, bring in diverse Armenian voices into our curriculum, which is so important.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad we could do it too. We've reached out to a number of different groups, all who want their stories told, talking about the hardships, the challenges, but also important to include the stories of resilience,
Yes.
strength, and contributions. Because we're lucky to live in such a diverse society, it's important for all our students to learn not only their own personal stories and identities, but those of everyone else around them who live in their communities, their state, and in our great nation. So we hope you can find some time and space to include Armenian American stories in your ethnic studies curriculum, as well as stories of other groups that we have focused on, including Arab American Studies, Jewish American Studies, Sikh American Studies, and we know there are many, many more, all of which make up the rich tapestry of our American society, the challenges, the hardships, but also those great stories of resilience, strength, and contributions. They're complicated, sometimes difficult, but well worth the time because it gives us all a better understanding of who we are as Americans and how we can move our nation forward, working together for a better society for us all. So thank you for the hard work you're doing.